How did Hypo Joe Charles go from being a world-class drag racing champion to being the Al Bundy of mattress sales with no regrets? Find out on today's show. The Nothing Else Mattress show starts now. When we started out, it was just about providing for our families while being in the driver's seat of our careers. I started in the mattress industry in 1999, and when I left the corporate world and Joe and I opened the Big Mattress Outlet in 2012, we could never have dreamed how rewarding business ownership would be for us.
My only regret is that we didn't do this sooner. I was terrified to make that jump, to leave the comfort of the corporate environment. As the old saying goes, I can promise you, parachute's never going to open if you first don't jump.
We've built a proven business model that's unique in the industry. It's profitable year after year, even through fluctuating markets and economies. We want to work with like-minded entrepreneurs who, like us, don't mind a little hard work, but want to own something that goes beyond just providing for our families financially. It offers exponential growth and profit opportunity, not to mention just a great culture and a really fun industry.
If you think you might be a fit, we'd love to talk to you.
Thank you for joining us on our second episode of the Nothing Else Mattress show. Today's guest is my partner, my best friend, my partner in business, my partner in life, my husband, Joe Charles. But for sake of today's show, he is an entrepreneur. And so we want to talk about that journey and how he has arrived from drag racing champion, Ford racing, top 10 sales, to where he is now at Big Mattress Outlet in Georgia as an owner. So, Joe, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for taking time to join us this morning.
So glad to be here. First things first, let me set this straight. As my 12-year-old daughter at the time said, world-class champion. Dad, you only went to 7 states. How can you be world champion? So it's
Hey, the
not
trophy says world champion.
Accomplishment. I was very, very blessed, very, very lucky. But anyway, I digress.
No, you have a great attitude toward it. So, but there is quite a journey, really. And I think one everybody would like to hear. When you and I met, you were at a top 10 Ford racing dealer, but you had a whole lot of life experience before that. Just kind of briefly paint the picture as to how you got to the point of being that top 10 dealer.
So my initial career started in finance. I was working at a bank as the collections officer, using all of my paid vacation time to go race. That would have been in 1999. Was very lucky, won 6 races in a row, won a lot of money. You're not supposed to do that with a hobby, but was using all of my time off to go race. And one of my big sponsors, the local Ford dealership, offered me the opportunity to go to work for them and do something that I was really passionate about and that I enjoyed and get paid for it, plus get extra time off to actually do vacation. So I worked at that dealership for probably 10 years until it closed. I had to go south of Atlanta from here, which was a 70-mile trip one way, just to do what I knew, and that was Ford Performance Parts, Ford Parts.
Mm-hmm.
And that
and I want to
old real fast.
And I want to pause you, and not to interrupt your story, but I want to pause there at that dealership where you're working in that small town, because I think it's important to emphasize the gravity of how small that place was, how small the dealership was, and yet how it was taken to be a top 10 dealer, because that was not a small accomplishment. Talk about how that happened.
So that dealership is very dear to my heart. A lot of great things happened at that dealership. The most important thing, I guess, is meeting you there by selling you parts for your car. But I went through one of those life-changing events called a divorce. To try to help myself get through things, I just buried myself in work. I worked from the time I got up to the time I went to bed. And this dealership was a very, very small dealership. At the time, Adairsville, Georgia had 3 traffic lights. 2 of those traffic lights were at the interstate. We used to tease that we had 5 Coke machines, and 2 of those Coke machines were at the dealership in Adairsville. So really, really small. but by way of the internet, we were able to sell parts literally all over the country. And we were slinging tons and tons of parts. And then one day I got an email that said, "Hey, congrats, you're a top 10 Ford racing dealer in the country," which was huge. It was a major accomplishment that couldn't have been done. It wasn't just me. I had a lot of help. I had a team of people that helped make that happen. But it was a lot of fun to do that and make that happen.
Yeah, so you're and we'll get into the racing a little bit in a minute, but right now we're kind of on the business side. So, but you at the time were racing a lot, and so describe how your racing relationships actually helped because you had this network of customers, really, I guess, right? That helped kind of contribute toward your reputation.
Well, in any business aspect, it's about the relationships that you build. So I had great relationships with our vendors. A lot of those vendors were sponsors that helped me. Uh, it was a great collaboration. It's hard to put a finger on, I did this or I did that, but it's just basically ran the racing like it was a business.
Yeah, you clearly had the mind for it. And that's a huge accomplishment, that top 10 Ford racing dealer. I mean, everybody knows who Ford is and Ford Racing, and for tiny little Adairsville, Georgia to be top 10. Now, where exactly were you ranked in that top 10? Where did you end up?
We came in, I believe, first on the list. We were seventh, if I'm not mistaken, uh, which is huge. I mean, you think of all the Ford dealerships in the country, and here we are, a little old Ford dealership in North Georgia is ranked in the top 10. That was a huge accomplishment.
So thinking back to the mindset that when you got that letter that you were ranked number 7, I know you and your competitive nature, were you content with being number 7 on the list?
No, well, number one, I was blown away that I even made the list. And then two is that, I didn't just skate in at number 10. I was well in the list. But, these dealerships that we were up against are huge dealerships. I mean, massive dealerships with tons of employees. It's really crazy to think back that we were able to accomplish that.
Yeah, and if my memory is correct, you climbed a couple of spots on the list over the few years that you were still there.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly where we were ranked, but it was top 5 by the time the store closed. So yeah, we did very well. And the
So
store closing had nothing really to do with performance sales, but the economy tanked. And the
right.
dealership that I worked at was what they called a dealer development store. So Ford actually paid the dealer to close the store because it would benefit the other 3 dealers surrounding us. Uh, so that's how that went.
So tell me about the gut punch though, when you've poured your heart and soul into a business. I mean, you're taking pride in what you're doing. Obviously, it's not just a job. You've grown the business there, the Ford racing side of it, and then to find out the dealership is closing. And it was an emotional thing, right? Because you said you're like emotionally attached to the dealership. You were fond of it. It wasn't just a job. So what that gut punch feel like?
It hurt. Uh, you and I had just bought a house, and
Mm-hmm.
our first payment was due April 1st. And March 31st, they set us all down and announced that they were closing the dealership. Uh, it was very, very scary. What do we do? What do we do now? So, to make the kind of money that I was accustomed to making and to be able to do what I was accustomed to do, and I had to drive to a dealership south of Atlanta, and I accepted a position there. They were also a top 10 Ford racing dealer, and I believe we got them up to number 3 at my time there.
How far was that job though? Well, first of all, how far did you live from the first dealership, and then what was
So
the
the
second
first
commute?
dealership was probably 2.5 miles, if that, from home. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
the second dealership was 70 miles one way from my driveway to where I parked. So that's 140 miles a day. If I didn't go to lunch, if I didn't stop and get fuel, that's just there and back. So I averaged 150 miles a day, 5 and sometimes 6 days a week.
Through what kind of traffic?
Horrible traffic. Atlanta traffic was horrible. Uh, Yeah, it
coming
was
and
ugly.
going.
You couldn't leave. If I had to be at work at 8 o'clock, I couldn't say, okay, it's going to take me an hour and a half to get to work and plan to be there at 8. I had to allow myself a lot of extra time. So most of the time I got to work really early. Other times I'd get to work close to 9 o'clock. If there was a major accident or something happened, it was the drive was grueling. I didn't realize just how much of a toll the drive was taking on me, but it was rough.
And anybody listening who has to sit in major traffic in a major city day after day, you know how that takes a toll on your patience. You feel like it's such a drastic waste of time. It's just infuriating to have to sit in traffic, day after day and feel like you have no choice. And then, your ride home. What'd you feel like by the time you made it home? Because you were working till at least 5, usually 6, right?
Yeah, the kids all laughed at me because I'm falling asleep on the couch after dinner, but if I left the dealership at 6, puts me home 7:30 ish, and then I'm asleep after dinner most evenings, sitting on the couch or in a chair before it was time to go to bed, and then I was up before everybody else got up to leave and go to work. I did that for
Mhm.
5.5 years.
Yeah, and I know probably a lot of our listeners have done that exact kind of thing. They're feeling what you were feeling at the time. Now, why did you hang in there though? Why did you feel like it was important to stay where you were? Why didn't you look for something else at the time? And that was a long 5 years for you.
So honestly, my priorities weren't in the right order. And I can see that today. I felt as though my obligation as a parent, as a father, was to provide for the family monetarily. And it's more than just money, it's the being there and being able to take my daughter to school, pick her up from school, and, spending quality time with the family. I didn't have that quality time. Uh, but I felt like it's something that I had to do. I felt like I had no other choice because my expertise was in the performance parts, and not every dealership has a department that does that. Uh, Honestly, I would probably still be in the Ford parts business if it not had been for you and opening these stores.
So before we get into opening the stores too much, I want to linger here for a second because this is also the same time when you were racing, which was really your passion, right? Talk a little
Yes.
bit about kind of that journey and where you started with actually racing. I mean, you dabbled at drag strips and stuff before, but kind of talk about that aspect of your life for a little bit.
So the racing is where I get very passionate. Bought my first Mustang December 3rd, 1988. Was still living at home. My mom said that I couldn't have a Mustang. And I said, well, I'm working. I have a job. I'm going to do this. And I ordered a new Mustang. I made it happen. Heck, I would have been 18, 19 years old at the time. Bought a brand new car, financed it for 3 years. Between a car payment and insurance, all I could do to make ends meet. And I'm still living at home. And it was probably not, hell, I'm not going to say probably. I was a terrible kid at that time. I gave my mama hell. And I can appreciate the stern parenting that I got growing up because it's made me who I am today. Uh, but I got this car, and then I end up having to get my own place, and I'm really having to hunker down. But the car was where that was what I did everything with. I played a lot. I modified the car a lot. I was racing a lot of places I probably shouldn't have been racing.
Now, what
Going to
day did you get the
racetrack with.
car?
I'm sorry.
What day did you get that car?
Oh, December 3rd, 1988.
How much did you pay for it?
$12,371 and change, tax and all. Yeah, it's terrible. It's terrible.
Sorry,
I
I
can
knew you
afford
would know that.
I can remember crap like that, but I can't remember a lot of other stuff. But anyway, uh, taught myself how to work on the car. Back then we didn't have the internet. We didn't have YouTube. We had books and manuals, and I had to figure this out. Uh, but in '99, I started racing an actual series, and I'd had some minor success before that, uh, but screwed around and won the first big national event. And then I thought, okay, let's go to the next one, and won that event, and won the next one, and the next one. And before I know it, I've won 6 races in a row, and had to actually get an accountant to help me with my taxes, because Uncle Sam says you don't make business with a hobby. It must be, you don't make money with a hobby. It must be a business. So my accountant said that I had to reinvest in the business, or I was going to have to pay a vast majority of that money back in taxes. So you tell a redneck guy who loves spending money on his car that you've got to spend that money on your car, you're going to have to give it to Uncle Sam. Well, I just spent more and more money on the car. And again, I had a lot of companies helping with sponsorships and helping with the race program. That was not something that was done by myself. I couldn't have accomplished that without the relationships that I built. But then in 2000, Ford Motor Company got behind a big series with big money. And first race, there were probably, I can't remember exactly, 63, 65 cars, which that's a lot of cars in a class, and made it to the finals in that race and won $7,500 to win, $500 for number one qualifier, and probably another 2 or 3,000 in contingency. That was a huge payday back then. That was a lot of money. So yeah, just the cars. It's just always been a thing for me. I was the kid sneaking out cars when I was growing up, driving. That was always me.
So when I knew you when you were racing, one thing that I noticed that really ties into the business aspect, which we'll get into in a minute, but you recognize the partnerships all along, and you've mentioned that several times in this conversation about how important it is that none of us can be successful on our own. We've got to have partnerships. And I think that's kind of a double red underline, as our friend Mark Kinsley would say.
Right.
Point here is that success never happens alone. There's always partnerships and people behind it. And it's important to give those people credit. But also remember, you were very business minded with your racing. Yes, it was a hobby and you were passionate about it, but those contingencies you mentioned, you were careful about working with companies that could, it was beneficial for both sides. Talk, just because a lot of our listeners may not have any idea how that works, what a contingency is. Talk a little bit about that.
Okay, great point. So contingency sponsors, those would be people, if you buy their parts, use their parts on the car, and then you run the appropriate decal. You see these race cars with all these decals all over them. That's what those are for the most part, are sponsorship decals, contingency decals. So if you win a race, and let's say Big Mattress Outlet was a sponsor, that's not a good thing because Big Mattress Outlet doesn't sell hot rod parts. But anyway, Mickey Thompson ran Mickey Thompson tires, ran a Mickey Thompson decal, and if I won a race and used their products and had their decal on the car, they would send me $300. If I runnered up, they would send me $150. But then I went to Mickey Thompson and, just asked for help, gave them a sponsorship proposal. I know what they can do for me. They can give me tires, but what can I do for them? It's promoting their products, using their products, speaking highly of their products, because that's what I use to win on Sundays with. But yeah, you have to have the support of others. And, it's crazy. In most aspects, whether it be business, racing, whatever, 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2. That's normally going to equal 3 if you're working with the right ones. Sometimes 1 + 1 could give you a negative number if you're working with the wrong people. You've got to choose the right people, and when you choose the right people, the sum is greater than their seemingly total.
Yeah, so that is a good explanation for why when you see race car drivers who win and they're celebrating their win, they go down the list of the this car and the that, and I can't rattle it off easily the way they can, but they know very well who their sponsors are, who they work, who contributes to their success, and they want to make sure they give them a plug. I've seen you give those acceptance speeches.
Oh yeah, and I can think back to the big win in Bradenton with the $7,500. I was young, I was very cocky. I got out of the car at the top end of the track and had a cameraman in my face with a camera. And, I pull out of my pocket a list of sponsors that I need to thank. Uh, it,
You were
kind
prepared.
of, yeah, I was prepared for that. There was a big chance that I wasn't going to win that, but in my mind, I'd already won it. So I wanted to be prepared, and I didn't want to forget anybody.
Oh man, I think we've got the footage of that somewhere, but it's on VHS. I have no idea how we could get it onto this clip, but that would be awesome if we could cut away. So when you were going back to the dealership that was south of Atlanta, you were driving so far, but you were also racing when you were working there, right? Wasn't there a different class during that time period?
Yes. So in that time frame is when the new Coyote stock started, and I was racing it with the NMRA. I had not been in a car in years, uh, competitively like that, and again with sponsors. I had somebody give me a car to use. I provided the motor. And then again, just with a bunch of help from a bunch of different companies, was able to put together a program and screw around and go to 6 finals and 7 races and win 4 of those. So a lot
Yeah,
of
and
fun.
that was the year that you were the world champion. That's what the trophy
Yeah,
says
7
anyway. We're
states
saying
world champion.
yeah, we're calling it world champion. That's what they call it. But it's no, it's no small feat. I was around to see all the work that goes into that. So, we laugh about the 7 states and calling it world champion, but it really was very well deserved and well earned. So you're working long hours at the dealership, and then several weekends a year, and even between races on the weekends, you're pouring your heart and soul into a race car. You were drained, weren't you? You didn't have much left to give.
Yeah, yeah. It was all that I could do to make things happen. And if I'm honest, that first year I probably wasn't giving it my all at my job because I was pushing so hard to win this series. Uh, and work at the time was just, it was no longer fun. Didn't realize how well things were at the previous dealership I was at, Parkway, the one that I really loved. Uh, this new store was a corporate environment. The economy sucked. They were forcing us to do more with less. Uh, was not a very good time at the end.
Yeah, and we don't want to, to bash a dealership, but at the same time, I do want the listeners to be able to relate to what you were feeling there, because I think so many people do have corporate jobs and in a career that they're very well qualified. I'm painting this whole picture because I want everybody to understand how well qualified you were for the job you were in, the position you were in. I mean, there was a level of comfort there. I mean, you still can rattle off part numbers for, random things from years ago. You were so well qualified. And even though it was a corporate environment, you wouldn't you say, how would you describe your fit for what you were doing as far as qualifications and just knowledge of the industry?
Uh, how about overqualified?
Yeah. No, but that's absolutely true.
I,
It
I,
was.
I knew the job like the back of my hand.
Yeah. So had someone asked you in those moments, will you ever change your career from anything related to the automotive industry? Would you have suspected that that's something you would do?
No, no, never in a million years would I have thought that I would get out of the business. Were there thoughts of having my own business in the automotive? Sure, but I watched so many people try that and do okay or work really really hard, and it, it it wasn't something that I was really interested in doing on my own because of the comfort of a regular job where I knew I had a steady paycheck and, you know, knew that I could go to work Monday through Friday and have a job.
Yeah, I think the comfort zone is what's so relatable for a lot of people. And as you know, the point of our show here is to talk about that leap of faith where people live in a comfort zone. They have a job that they're qualified for and it provides for the family, but they maybe have these little dreams of leaving and working for themselves, or everything's not quite right. I know when I think back to my background at corporate, I've talked a lot about not feeling like I was in the driver's seat. Weren't there a lot of times that you were there at a corporate store where you felt like you, as good as you were at your job, you didn't have much control?
So in a corporate environment, I hate this environment, but it's all about the bottom line. What can we do to make the absolute most profit margin? And it would seem that corporate really didn't care about what was going on in people's lives and outside of work. You belonged to them, and you were going to bust your butt to make things happen. And if you didn't do it, they'd find somebody else that would. They just didn't. I hate to say they didn't care, because I think the people in the dealership cared, but it's the people above them that are pushing them and rattling those chains, and you got to do this, you got to do that, and you've got to do more with less, and just go 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 go, just that constant push. I believe it was the perfect storm that allowed me to make that leap of faith and make that jump.
I think that's a really relevant point that you just made. The actual individuals you worked with were probably, that they weren't the problem. It was the way the business was set up, the fact that it was corporate, and nothing wrong with big corporations, not knocking that, and not knocking, people that work there. But for you, with an entrepreneurial spirit in mind, it was, as you said, the perfect storm that kind of gave you a little bit of a springboard to leave. Because about all that time, I'm kind of feeling the same thing at my job. And so, I've told my story in another episode, but I left and started a store in hopes, and you and I talked about it. We hoped that, with this one store that we opened back in 2012, that if I worked there for a couple of years, got it off the ground, that might enable you to leave and join me.
Yeah,
Now, I want to,
take 18, 24 months
yep,
at best before I could leave the comfort of my job. But heck, what, 90 days in, you
it
know,
was. And I want to tell the little story there of Black Friday because, um, my background at Simmons had outlet stores, and they had never pushed a big Black Friday sale. That was never a big thing for the mattress stores in the Simmons environment where I had come from. So that was actually one that took us by surprise, because me and the kids had a shopping habit. Every Black Friday, we'd go out Thanksgiving night, we'd shop all night, we'd get breakfast somewhere, we'd come home, we'd sleep all day. That was kind of our tradition. So you were kind enough that first year. Now, we'd opened in August, so here we are in November. You're still working full time at the dealership, and you had been kind enough to offer to work the store that day to cover for me so we could stay true to our shopping tradition. Tell me what happened that morning when you were in the store.
so first off, at the time, I knew very little about mattress sales. I just previously said I was overqualified in my position with Ford Racing Parts. Now I am grossly underqualified to sell a mattress. My job was just to babysit the store, to take care of the one, maybe two customers that came in, just so we could have the store open. So you guys stay out all night shopping. As I'm leaving to go to the store to cover the store on my day off from my real job, you're like, don't call me unless you absolutely have to. We're going to bed.
I'm going to sleep.
Yeah. Gosh. And then I get to the store, and then, this is our first Black Friday. We just opened in August, I guess, and here it is, the middle of November. And I mean, slammed. I, I've got people coming in, I'm trying to juggle them, and I'm going, well, she said not to call, but this is money potentially that's leaving. I got to do something. So I call you, and you're like, whatever. I'm like, no, seriously, I'm slammed. I need some help. And I believe to date, it was the best day that we had ever had in the store. Am I remembering that correctly?
It was for several years. It was yeah, yeah. So it was a really good day. It was definitely our best day up to that point.
And
Yeah.
you have
So
a qualified person running the show.
yeah, that was a rookie mistake on my part, and but that illustrates the point that we can have a great concept for a business. We can be very well qualified. I had the background in mattress business up to that point. I had a lot of experience, and so I was qualified for that. But that was a rookie mistake on my part because I misjudged, the
Well, we
traffic and
learned a
how
lot.
that was going to
We've
go.
learned so much through this process, and we continue to
Yeah.
learn.
Of course, but you're never perfect. We laugh about these I'm gonna call them mistakes. It certainly, wasn't a bad thing to have a store full of traffic when we weren't expecting it. But so we got through that day, and we had been pretty busy up to that point. And I remember, I didn't mind working 6 days a week, and it's not the work that I minded, but we truly were to the point, as you said, the morning you were there by yourself is okay. We're leaving money on the table by not having someone else here, that we actually need more than one person. So that was the feeling that I was getting in the overall business. So I remember coming to you and saying, well, you remember those words. You tell it how it came across from the receiving end.
Yeah, it was basically poop or get off the pot. You're like, you're either going to have to leave the comfort of your job and go to work for yourself, or I'm hiring somebody. And honestly, it was, for me, it was the perfect storm. Uh, had just was at my wit's end with the real job. The drive was the biggest part of that. The drive was killing me. I didn't know it at the time, but the drive was killing me, and the stress in the environment that I was in with the pressure from, big corporation, that we just said, okay, drawing a line in the sand. January 1 of 2013, I'm starting to work for myself. Uh,
Hmm. Was it
and
scary?
hell yeah, it was scary. Yeah, it was not just scary for me, it was terrifying. We had to change a lot of things within our family. We cut way back on a lot of things. But now, when I'm putting in all this extra work, you know, we were reaping 100% of the benefits. Uh, it means so much more when you're busting your butt and you're working that hard and you're doing that for yourself. And then today, fast forward, you know, 11 plus years, it's even more gratifying that we're able to change the lives of those that work for us, and then obviously the people that are our customers, by changing the way they sleep in making their lives better.
I would say, you tell me if I'm wrong, but when you were especially in your final days there in the corporate environment in automotive, you weren't happy.
So
Comfortable job, yeah.
the best way to really illustrate that would be probably 6 weeks after I left the job south of Atlanta. My daughter was 12 at the time. When she comes to me and says, "Dad, you're a lot more pleasant to be around," that was a wake up call. That was that helped me learn a lot about myself. Number one, yes, my 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 responsibility as a parent is to provide for my family, but that is way more than just monetary. That is being there, being around, and being able to do things with the family, being able to pick my daughter up from school, being able to take her to school, just being able to do those things. Uh, yeah, I was not a nice person. I did not like the person I was becoming there, just with all the stress and baloney that I was dealing with.
And when you took vacations at your previous job, mentally, were you on vacation or was your mind still back at work?
No, you didn't have the ability to leave and leave everything there.
Yeah, you
You
couldn't
just
actually
couldn't.
relax. So, obviously we've had an extremely successful business. We're very thankful that we've both of us very thankful. We talk about that all the time. We look there, you're sitting in our living room at home, and we look around and we say, man, we're so thankful. We're so blessed because we know that it wasn't just a result of ourselves. It was the people we surrounded ourselves with. It was the people we partnered with. A little humility along the way and taking some advice from people who were smarter than we were, applying it. But we can't overestimate just the work, right? I mean, was it ever about just working less, or was it about just different work?
No, it's different work, and we probably work more now than we did. And heck, we just got back from Florida. We got to visit my mom, but on the way down, it's like we're having a company meeting in the truck on the way down,
Board
discussing,
meeting.
yeah, and talking about this and talking about that. And but this is something that we really enjoy.
So I want to tell one more little story between ourselves, just because it's a cute little thing, but it was really that's your favorite word, cute. Sorry, I used it.
Yes, thank you.
um, but it was a pivotal point for me, and you had a lot to do with it, because as I was wanting to branch out on my own, I've told in another episode that I, briefly kind of thought I wanted to open a clothing store, and that's another story. But the point I'm getting at is that there was a conversation between you and I that was because everybody around me was telling me, no, mattresses is what, that's the business you should stay in. But you said something that sealed the deal for me mentally. Remember what you said?
Oh, absolutely, I do. Uh, I'm not going to say we butted heads, but we butted heads. You wanted to open a high-end clothing boutique. I don't know squat about a high-end clothing boutique. Heck, at the time, I didn't know squat about mattresses, but I knew you did. Uh, but you had worked with a bank, and they wanted you to sell one of your prized possessions, wanted you to sell a car to have some capital, and you jumped through all of these hoops, and only for the bank to say, "Yeah, no, we're just not going to be able to do that." In a small bit of fit of rage, you were like, "Screw all that. I'll open a mattress store, and in 6 months, I'll have enough capital to be able to open my own business." And I've been accused many times of missing the switch in my brain that allows me to think before I speak. And I just kind of looked at you, and I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? You think you can make that kind of money in uh, 6 months doing what you know and what you love? You know, I don't come home. I don't bitch about my job. I don't cry about how rotten things are. I'm not the woe is me kind of guy. I'm just going to do what I do it to the best of my ability. And I look at you and I said, I'll never be able to sell Mrs. Smith a matching pants and blouse. It's never going to happen. But I could sell Mrs. Smith a mattress set. I know I can. I know it with all my heart. At some point in time, I would like to think that this business would be strong enough that I could go to work for myself, but I'll never be able to do that in clothing. And it was not a nice conversation. It was, and I kind of blew up for just a second. Uh, but I think it was then that you had the epiphany. But now there's
Yeah.
another part of that story that I want to tell.
Okay.
So fast forward several years, the first store has been very successful, and we're contemplating opening the second store. I said, you know what? I got this. We can do this. I'll run this store. You go do the clothing store. And how did you respond to that?
Why on earth would I want to do such a thing? We got a
Exactly.
family business here. You're selling Miss Smith mattresses. But no, it was it was what I needed to hear in the moment. It was a little bit of tough love that you were giving me, and you were going to support me either way. You've always been good like that. But in the moment, I needed to hear how I needed the vision of how this really could be a family business. And that's what we decided we wanted. And for those listeners, I mean, it's not for everybody. Some people need to have a business that they own and their partner does something else, but there sure are a lot of blessings to having a family business. Now we've got multiple locations. My son runs one of our stores. My daughter is entering the mattress business in Canada for a different company, of course. But the point of it is that you and I, as life partners, are also business partners. And I would say it's improved our marriage even just tenfold. I mean, we loved
Absolutely.
each other before, but
Yeah, everybody's
you
like,
know,
how can you work with your wife? It's been spectacular. They also
we
said the
make
same
it
thing
work.
about the house. How did you not kill one another? Man, we loved it. It was fun.
It's fun. It really is. And we've taken advice again from a lot of people. I mean, it doesn't come naturally. We're imperfect humans. I mean, we butt heads sometimes, but we've learned how to do that in such a way that it's constructive. Who gets the 51% in each conversation? And we
And,
can, I think.
and speaking of kids, who's producing this video?
Yeah. So Joe, your daughter Danielle has. So I have to brag on her for a second because I wanted to do this podcast for quite some time, and the holdback for me is that I'm at the age I don't want to learn new technology. So I had all the equipment, I had everything set up, and but as far as recording and inserting it into some sort of format that could then go be distributed in podcast form, I don't know how to do that. I know I could learn, but tomorrow is always a better day to learn. So she's working for us part-time right now until she goes to dental school in the fall. So I kind of just dumped this in her lap. Just like, do you know anything about this? She's like, sure, I'll do it for you. And within a few hours, she had it produced and put together. So the final version that you see here is the audience is, I did not do that. That is all Danielle. So thank you, Danielle, for finally making the podcast happen. And I, yeah, no, she's the brains behind that part of it. But yeah, family business and it's been such a blessing. And, we talked about, so let's talk about the blessings for a little bit because, obviously financially it's been a blessing. I mean, that goes without saying, but money's not what makes happiness. I mean, it buys Mustang parts and that makes you happy.
It sure helped.
It doesn't hurt. Yeah. The success certainly has been nice, but we recognize that that's not what makes us happy. So tell me from your standpoint, what it is about our lives that we've built together with the business that makes you just happy as opposed to where you were before.
That's going to be hard to verbalize. I touched on it a little bit a moment ago. One, uh, you know, not only we are improving our lives, but we have employees that we're responsible for now. Uh, Heck, most of our employees have been with us years and years and years and years. We take care of them, try to, uh, but for me, it's just I don't know. It's hard for me to verbalize that.
It is. It is hard to put into words. And sorry for putting you on the spot with that but it is a conversation that you and I both have a lot is that, but you did touch on it earlier, just the fact that when we work hard, we see the results of it. We are creating something. And when we talked about
Don't work
expansion,
if we
was
don't
that?
work. Well,
Uh,
conversely, if we don't work,
yeah, no, it,
we see the results of that. I mean,
as we should, that's how it should be.
yeah. So none of this was about trying to work less and make all kinds of money.
Yeah. And I think if you enter business ownership with that attitude, they want to make a bunch of money and I don't want to work, then you're destined to fail because that's not what creates success. But as we've talked about the expansion, we could have opened more stores, hired more people, but, we talked about franchising and we've talked about it here on the show before too, but the franchising our model because the happiness that we've experienced as business owners, entrepreneurs, but we wanted to help somebody else have that too, right? We wanted to kind of,
want to share the success. I
yeah,
guess is the best way to say that. And
yeah.
not only in our business lives, but our personal lives and in everything that encompasses that.
So if we were going to sum up, if you were going to sum up sort of this journey in such a way that um, might motivate someone else who's in the same shoes that you painted earlier, making working for a corporate job that they're well qualified at, maybe a comfort zone, but having that spirit, wishing they were in the driver's seat. What advice would you give them?
So for me, and I'm trying to remember the comedian's name. Gosh, I can see him does Family Feud. Steve Harvey. He does a little monologue that's great, but he's talking about your parachute. I can assure you, your parachute will never open if you don't jump. You have to take the leap. Now, granted, you've got to be qualified and you've got to know what you're doing and you've got to partner with the right people. Uh, but I can think of several friends that have done the same thing that I've told. Kind of, man, you can do this. This you can do it.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Heck, Nathan is one that comes to mind right off the bat. Loved watching uh, Nathan grow from starting in a job with a temporary agency to some 20 years later, probably owning his own business of the same sort with multiple locations. Uh, but watching him think about that and ponder, is this the right move for me? Uh, just, I love to see other people succeed. Absolutely,
And
positively love it. It
we do.
it gives
We
me a
love that so
feeling
much.
like none other. I just, as a society, I wish we could see more and more of people celebrating other people's success instead of the haters. You know,
Yeah, and
grab
just
the moment, real.
to kind of just to describe to those listening, Nathan is a decades long friend of yours who, as you said, started at a temp agency and then worked in a brick and
Out of
mortar.
school.
Yeah, and then worked in a brick and mortar tile store, flooring store for years, became a manager there, and then for years talked to you, right, about. And we didn't get Nathan's permission. We're going to talk about him, and then he's going
Yeah.
to. We'll tell him, hey, you need to watch this episode. But just real quick, tell a little bit about the conversation that you had, because I remember he was scared to death, and you were a person that he came to often.
Yeah, but so was I. And again, had it not been for the perfect storm, I'm not sure that I would have had the guts to make that leap on my own. You know, I had a great partner that 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 made the leap for me basically, and then
Drug you
said,
along.
"You're going to get on this train because it's leaving the station." But just, gosh, so many others that we know, that we've talked to, and heck, we're still learning. We learn every day, learn something new, trying to figure out ways to make ourselves and our business better. And
Yep.
uh, I say this, I wish I had done this sooner. Would I have been ready to do this right out of high school? No. Would I have been ready to do this, 20 years ago? Probably not. But if I wish we'd have done this several years sooner than we did.
Yeah, I think that's a resounding theme, and I think it's something that everybody will hear a lot from future guests. Is like you said, maybe not right out of high school. When we say we wish we'd done it sooner, we don't mean too soon, but that time period that gets by between the time you first are qualified mentally, physically, you're at the right age, and you first start having the desire, the time between that and the time you actually take the leap of faith, most people would look back who have been successful business owners and say that was too long. They wish they had shortened that and done something sooner. They took too long in the fear zone.
Yeah.
And you
And
and I
if
both
you wait
agree.
until the time is right and you think you know it all, it's never going to
And they
happen. I mean,
yep.
I wish we could start fresh with what we know today. And I can't imagine, you know, where we would be today if we had all the knowledge that we do today when we started. Uh, but you can't wait on that. You have to do it now.
Yeah, and we call it a leap of faith for a reason, because faith is not, blind. There's some evidence that you got a formula for success. You know what you're doing. You're partnered with the right people, but it is a little bit unknown in the future. I mean, you can't predict the future. So, but again, we're so happy that we both made the leap of faith. We're happy where we are now. We're happy with the expansion we've got going on, and any final words of inspiration for someone who's kind of teetering on the edge?
It's all about surrounding yourself with the right people. I don't think you can do this alone. I mean, there are probably some people that have, but you just have to have the right team in place, the right people in your corner, and you have to know that you're still learning every single day, and that you're not going to be perfect.
And give yourself some credit for your own abilities, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
well, yeah, you have to. Now,
yeah, don't be afraid of what you can accomplish yourself.
Fail every day. This is not a guaranteed recipe for success. There's a lot of hard work involved, but it's so rewarding to do this and make it happen and make it work.
It sure is. Thank you so much for sharing your story with everybody. I knew you had to be the first guest on the show. Of course, there couldn't be anybody else that was more qualified or higher up on the list than the love of my life and business partner and life partner. But thank you again for sharing so much and kind of being a little vulnerable there too. Appreciate your candor.
I really appreciate that. And now, as I say, I'm going to put my salesman hat on for just a second. It has just occurred to me as I've been saying this, I wish we knew then what we know today. This podcast is sponsored by BMO Franchise. Could you imagine if we'd been able to start fresh, knowing what we know today, where we would be in another 10 or 11 years? That's a lot of fun. And this new franchise venture is so freaking exciting. I can't wait to see where that goes. And it's just very, very exciting.
It is. And you know what? That's a great point, because launching the franchise is like launching another business for us. And here we are, both of us saying, we wish we'd done this sooner. We were a little afraid. We had, and why did we not learn from our own story? We preach this to people for years and years about take the leap of faith, just do it, have some confidence in yourself, partner with the right people. We said all those things to other people. And yet when it was time for us to expand, we put it off because we were afraid. And here we are now.
Yeah. I don't want to say we were lazy, because we weren't. We could have opened many stores earlier, but we were waiting until we were empty nesters, if you will.
Yeah, we were comfortable in our lifestyle, and tomorrow was always a better day to do it. But here we are now. So full steam ahead, and so much interest in franchising so far. We just launched this, so we haven't signed the first one yet, but we have had an overwhelming amount of interest in it. So I think that it's going to be great. We're going to definitely got some great partners on the horizon. So yeah, as the show's sponsored by that. So what's that?
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes. All right. Well, go enjoy your day. And to everybody listening, if you're thinking about taking a leap of faith, just do it. Thank you for joining us on Nothing Else Mattress. We'll see you next time.